Dream blessings. I'm Susan Weed. I've been an herbalist for 50 years. And during that time, I've had some good ideas. 3 of my best ideas have to do with the 3 traditions of healing, the 7 medicines, and nourishing herbal infusions. I talk about the 3 traditions of healing in my green book, Healing Wise. And very simply, they are the scientific tradition, the heroic tradition, and the wise woman tradition. The scientific tradition measures and fixes. The heroic tradition cleanses and balances. And the wise woman tradition nourishes wholeness. Now, the 7 medicines I also talk about and write about quite a lot. That's serenity medicine, story medicine, mind medicine, lifestyle medicine, alternative medicine, pharmaceutical medicine, and high-tech medicine. But we're focusing right now on my very best idea, which is nourishing herbal infusions. Nourishing herbal infusions are one of the mainstays of the wise woman tradition, which heals by nourishing. You know, in every religious text I've come across, I'm told that I am made in perfection. And so I ask myself, what's in between that perfection that I am and expressing that perfection? And the answer that I came up with was nourishment. That I need optimum nourishment in order to be optimally healthy. Well, now, perhaps you've tried to change your diet. I know I tried to change my diet. It can be difficult. And it's even harder if you give people advice about changing their diets. It's very difficult to make that work. And so I backed off from trying to change diets and thought, is there something that I can add? Well, for many years, I worked in health food stores. And there were all kinds of supplements in those health food stores, and I thought maybe supplements were the way to go. But the more I read and the more I studied, the more I found that supplements really were just partial. They weren't really getting me that optimum nourishment that I was looking for. And so I looked to the herbs. I had already been an herbalist, but I was, primarily using herbs just as medicine. This was a new thing I was thinking about. Rather than just to use herbs as medicine, to use herbs as a way to nourish myself and to really bring myself that optimum health. Now, a nourishing herbal infusion needs to be made of a nourishing herb, and we're going to look at some specific nourishing herbs together and see what they do and how to make a nourishing herbal infusion. But an infusion is different than a tea, and so why don't we start there? Because most of us are very familiar with making herbal tea. We know just how to make an herbal tea. We put a tea bag in our cup. Our teapot has boiling water, and we pour the boiling water over the tea bag in the teacup. I'm making an herbal tea. It's wonderful to put some honey in your herbal tea. Honey itself is a very important healing food. When we make an herbal tea, we're using a very small amount of an herb, and we're brewing that for a very short time. Oh, my herbal tea is done. Usually we don't brew an herbal tea for more than a minute or 2. And so we use aromatic herbs to make our herbal teas, things that smell wonderful, like chamomile or peppermint. When we're making a nourishing herbal infusion, however, we're going to use a lot more herb. Let's make a nourishing herbal infusion with nettle. I've just weighed out 1 ounce of dried stinging nettle. When I make the tea, I can use fresh herb or dried herb, but when I'm making an infusion, I always use dried herb. Ooh, that tastes wonderful. I'm going to put this 1 ounce of dried stinging nettle. It's a lot of herb, isn't it? Into a quart jar. Now, if you're working on the metric system, You'll be using a liter jar and 30 grams of herbs. Yes, 30 grams is slightly more than an ounce, but a liter is slightly more than a quart, so it seems to work out. 1 ounce by weight of dried herb makes an infusion. When we're making a tea, we use a small amount of herb and we brew it for a short amount of time. When we're making an infusion, we use a large amount of herb. Now, where are my pot holders? Here we go. And we're going to pour a quart of boiling water over this 1 ounce of nettle here. Here we go. All right. Got a funnel so I don't make a mess. We'll fill our jar right up to the top there. A little more. Oh yeah. That looks good. We're going to be talking about what's in these nourishing herbal infusions, all kinds of course, nourishment. But in order to get that nourishment, we're going to put a tight lid on our infusion, and we're going to let that sit for a minimum of 4 hours. Here's an herbal tea. Dried or fresh herb, a very small amount, and brewed for a very short time. We can use aromatic herbs or nutritive herbs like rose hips. Add honey, makes a wonderful herbal tea. Here's a nourishing herbal infusion. This is 1 ounce of dried herb in a quart jar, or 30 grams of dried herb in a liter jar, filled to the top with boiling water with a tight lid put on it, allowed to steep for 4 hours. Now, I'll tell you the truth. What I usually do is I put that tea kettle up to boil when I go in the bathroom to brush my teeth at night. It takes just about the same amount of time for a quart of water to boil as it does for me to brush my teeth. So by the time I hear the tea kettle whistle, it's time to hang up the toothbrush, come in the kitchen, weigh out my herb, put it in the jar, fill it right up to the top with boiling water, put my tight lid on it, turn out the light and go to sleep. Next morning, my infusion is ready to strain. The liquid goes in the refrigerator and is refrigerated until I drink it, and nourishing herbal infusions do not stay good for a very long time. They're very rich in protein, and so usually we only keep them in the refrigerator for 1 or 2 days at the most. So that's why we're making a quart at a time, because we're just going to be making the amount that we're going to drink. If I need to make it in the morning, then I simply look at what time it is, and 4 to 6 hours later, I strain that infusion out, squeezing the herb to get all the good out of it, putting that liquid in the refrigerator, where I then drink it. Nourishing herbal infusions, one of my very, very best ideas. I drink a quart of nourishing herbal infusion every single day. I was visiting my friend Betsy, and I noticed on the doorway going out of her kitchen that there was a smack on the doorframe. And it looked just like the kind of smack that a wheelchair might make as it goes through a doorway. But it was much higher on the doorway than a wheelchair would. And I said to Betsy, do you have a giant friend and a giant wheelchair that is smacking your doorframe? And she said, no, that's where I take my infusion every morning, and I smack it up against the door to get the lid off. And I said, Betsy, you need to use a 2-part lid. It's true that when we put that lid on hot water, it can really vacuum seal down. But if you use a 2-part lid, then you can always unscrew this part and get your fingernails under that part and break that vacuum seal. Yes, she was indeed using the very convenient 1-part lid, but it's not so convenient or easy to get off afterwards. So I like a canning jar. It's a sturdy jar. It's not going to break when that boiling water is put in there. And that 2-part lid. These are the ingredients that we need for our nourishing herbal infusion. Now, speaking of ingredients, I'm going to go over to the table where I've laid out some of the herbs that we use for nourishing herbal infusions. And I'd like you to follow me over there as I go so that we can look together at some of the herbs that we would use for nourishing herbal infusions, and then we'll talk more specifically about the nutrients and what we get from using these nourishing herbal infusions. Let's go, Deb. We're used to seeing herbs sold in capsules, but herbs in capsules are the most expensive, most dangerous, and least effective way to use herbs. We don't really want to use herbs in capsules as ways to get our nourishment. No, thank you. And we're also used to seeing herbs sold as tinctures. Now, tinctures are really excellent medicine, and I use tinctures for my medicine. But tinctures don't give me the nourishment that I want. So we're not going to use tinctures either. We're going to get dried herbs. We don't want to get those dried herbs in tea bags because each one of these tea bags is about half an ounce. And since, about 1/100th of an ounce, and so we would have to use an enormous amount of tea bags. Here's what we want: bulk herbs. I'm going to buy those herbs in bulk. All right, we're going to get, what was in here? This is a pound of linden. Linden, beautiful, beautiful herb. We're going to be making an infusion of linden, one of my favorite herbs, linden flower. And I have YouTubes, this wonderful YouTube about harvesting linden. So you can see it's right up in the linden tree, harvesting the blossoms. Many cities have linden avenues and linden trees on the linden avenue. It's one of the easiest herbs for you to harvest yourself. Makes a wonderful, nourishing herbal infusion. We just made an infusion of stinging nettle. This is how it comes from the store. And this is what it looks like if you harvest your own. And this is our own wild harvested stinging nettle. You can see that when you buy it, it's already cut up. If you harvest your own, then before you use it, you have to take your scissors and cut your nettle up. And the apprentices say, this is the hardest part of getting your own nettle for infusion. Harvesting it is not that difficult. Drying it is not that difficult. And again, I have YouTubes showing every step along the way. You can go right to my YouTube channel and find out exactly how to harvest your own linden if you want to, but you certainly don't need to harvest your own linden or your own nettle or cut it up. But there it is. We have cut that up, and now it's just as well cut up as the store-bought nettle. Ooh, what's here? Oh, yes. Red clover. It looks pretty red here too, doesn't it? Red clover. Red clover is almost magic in the number of things that it can do. I'm really excited to tell you about the red clover. And red clover is another pretty easy herb to harvest. Somebody was saying to me, I don't have enough time to harvest red clover. And I say, I just set myself a goal of harvesting 20 to 25 blossoms a day, every day that it's sunny and the bees are out. And by the end of the summer, I have a lot more red clover than you would think. I was just teaching this weekend, and one of my students said, I grew oat straw this year. She said, that was one of the easiest things that I have ever grown in my garden. And I said, yes, basically you just throw the oat seed down, kind of stomp it into the ground, stand back, and when it's nice and tall, cut it down, or buy oat straw from any herbal supplier. Oat straw, well, we know about people who are feeling their oats, and I'm going to tell you a lot more about feeling your oats when we use oats as a nourishing herbal infusion. Here's some comfrey leaves.